The city of Baltimore has become the latest city to require just cause before eviction. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the new just cause provisions that were passed in the city of Baltimore. But before I get into that article, go ahead, hit that like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you want to see on this channel. I'm going to work to keep bringing you articles about the Eviction Moratorium and other news that's of interest to landlords. So, this article, it comes to us from the Baltimore Sun, and it says, Baltimore tenant protections take effect, requiring just cause before eviction. Yeah, there's just cause laws that are, in cities throughout the entire country right now, mostly in the more tenant-friendly states, but I'm seeing it more and more often, and I just want landlords to know what they can expect when a city passes a law like this, and to look out for it, especially if you're in a state that would normally be considered more landlord friendly. Look out for legislation like this, because this does not benefit landlords at all. A Baltimore bill that provides renters with more safeguards from eviction went into effect Monday, a piece of legislation intended to combat a potential housing crisis caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The Just Cause bill requires landlords to provide a codified reason, one outlined and defined by city officials, for not renewing a lease when a tenant's lease expires. The legislation was filed following a rise in landlords using alternative means to remove tenants. It was enacted without Mayor Brandon Scott's signature. Okay, so yeah, right now, landlords, they were doing anything they could to be able to remove tenants during the pandemic because of the eviction moratorium. And they had ways of working around it, and it looks like they actually have a link to an article in here that goes over one of the ways that they use. Let me go ahead and skip over to this article. Okay, and I'll read from this other article, which comes from also from the Baltimore Sun, and it says, in tenant holding over court, a landlord can take action against a tenant whose lease has expired without having to provide a codified reason for not extending it or renewing the lease. This legal route has become popular in 2020. In August and September alone, 233 tenant holding over cases were filed in Baltimore District Court, an 82% increase in activity from the same 2-month period a year before, according to a Baltimore Sun data analysis. So yeah, it looks like what they're saying is that as soon as the tenant's lease expires, then you don't have to renew that lease, and you can ask the tenant to go ahead and leave because they only signed maybe a 1-year lease and their lease is over. Well, guess what? They have to leave. There's nothing to say that they have to be renewed. There's nothing to say that you have to keep them in there. And if they're not paying, that is a good way to actually remove a tenant. So I actually made a video about that whole topic a while back, because in Omaha, that was a way that some of the landlords here were using to remove tenants who weren't paying during the eviction moratorium. And if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But this new legislation is going to put a stop to that, at least in Baltimore. So let's get back to the original article. In a July 19th letter to the City Council, Scott said he had reservations about the bill because parts of it conflict with state law. There are doubts about the city's authority to implement and enforce this bill's provisions locally due to the significant state law governing this subject, Scott said in the letter. The Baltimore City Law Department, in a February letter, said state law gives landlords in Baltimore City the right to terminate a year-long tenancy with 90 days notice and a shorter time period for other types of tenancies. It declined to approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency. So yeah, the city law department doesn't even think this law is legal. Okay, the state law runs counter to what the city just passed. So the landlords in this city, they have a good lawsuit, and they should sue, because this law, it doesn't even look like it passes the state law in Maryland. So I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that they would put this sort of provision in place, but they didn't really think these things through. Their own city law department said it wasn't legally sufficient. I mean, come on. And the mayor said he wouldn't sign off on it. So what is this about other than trying to get votes and trying to appease a few people? It's a ridiculous thing that they're trying to do here. Still, City Councilman Antonio Tony Glover, the bill's lead sponsor, called the passage a win and said he introduced the legislation in January after finding out the state and federal moratorium on evictions due to COVID-19 did not protect all tenants from losing their homes. When I learned that landlords found a loophole in the eviction moratorium and were kicking tenants behind on their rent out of their homes when their lease expired, I stepped up alongside housing advocates to formulate a plan to protect them, he said in a statement. Yeah, a plan that isn't legal. Okay, come on. What a moron, okay? This is all about trying to look good so you can get votes. And this hopefully will be just thrown out because it's encountered to state law, okay? And if these landlords have to sue, I mean, I hate the fact that, they're going to have to pay attorneys and go to court just so they can get this law taken out. Maybe the mayor will just, veto it somehow, but man, I mean, talk about absolutely ridiculous. I mean, this is the kind of legislation that you see, this tenant-friendly legislation that doesn't make any sense, and it ends up costing the tenants in the long run, okay? So I'm hoping that this gets thrown out. Baltimore landlords now must provide renters with the opportunity to renew their leases unless a good cause exception exists. Those exceptions include a substantial breach of lease, the landlord wanting to recover the property for a relative as a primary residence, the landlord wanting to permanently remove the property from the rental market, or the landlord needing to conduct repairs that cannot be done in otherwise occupied properties. Yeah, okay, so they have a small list of reasons why the landlord should be able to not renew the lease, okay? There are 1,000 good reasons. And the main thing is, it is the landlord's property. It does not belong to the tenant. If the tenant isn't paying rent, that is a good reason not to want to renew the lease, okay? If the tenant is unemployed long term, that is a good reason. They no longer meet the stipulations and the requirements that we had put in place for a qualified tenant to move into our property. And I know that, it's unfortunate. There is a pandemic going on. However, the landlord's responsibility is not to cover all of the financial losses of their tenants. That is not the landlord's job. That is, the tenant's responsibility. And to a further extent, maybe the government's responsibility to take care of those in need. Landlords also must offer tenants a chance to renew their leases at least 75 days before it expires. The lease cannot be subject to a retaliatory increase in the rent or change the previous lease term significantly, according to the bill. Carol Ott, a tenant advocacy director at the Fair Housing Action Center of Maryland, said the bill would help correct the power imbalance between landlords and tenants. It's never made any sense to me that someone could be thrown out of their home and not be given a reason why, she said. It's a good foundation. We don't have to provide a reason why, okay? It's the same thing when I choose the tenant to live in my property, okay? I am choosing the best qualified tenant. I don't have to provide a reason why to the other 20 applicants. Well, the only reason, and this is if they ask, because the grand majority of people don't ask, the only reason I provide is that I chose a better qualified tenant, okay? And that's it. I don't tell them anything else, and they don't have the right to know anything else, okay? And it doesn't make any sense that when you're removing a tenant from your property, you have to, come up with all of the, I had to write them a love letter, a two-page report explaining my reasonings, etc. No, simply put, if you own this property, it's yours. You have a right to it. Now, you signed a 1-year or maybe a 2-year contract and you allowed the tenant to stay, but that isn't a reason that they should be able to stay in there indefinitely. And that's what they're really going down to here, is they're taking the rights of the property owner of, being able to do what they want to do with their property. They're taking those away from the property owner, and I don't like it. Okay, so these just cause eviction laws, I hope that, they don't spread throughout the country. They don't spread anymore. I hope this one in Baltimore somehow faces, legal challenges from the landlords there, because it doesn't appear to be legal according to their own state law. So yeah, hang in there, landlords. Let's hope that this doesn't come to a city near you.